Welcome to BrainFuel, the place where true stories ignite your mind and heart. Today, we bring you a story of courage, humanity, and life-changing choices, stories that will make you question what you would do if the world asked for just one act of kindness. Stay tuned, because what you're about to hear will leave you speechless. Imagine walking down a rainy street, cold and alone, your life filled with struggle, and then you see a man, an old billionaire, struggling in his car. No one stops, no one helps, but you do. Just for a moment, you risk everything to lend a hand. Little did anyone know that one choice would change not just his life, but your entire future. This is the story of Elijah, a poor black man with nothing to his name, who chose to stop when everyone else walked past. That night, he didn't know it, but he had sparked a chain of events that would force a billionaire to face his own humanity, reveal secrets of wealth, power, and loneliness, and ultimately challenge the very meaning of kindness itself. Imagine fear gripping your chest, raindrops soaking your clothes, sirens wailing nearby, and the person you help looks at you with desperation, hope, and gratitude. That moment, the moment you decide to act, becomes more than just a choice. It becomes the turning point for a life you never thought could change. Elijah didn't just save a man, he unknowingly saved himself too. But here's the twist. The billionaire didn't just want to thank you, he wanted to repay Elijah in ways money could never explain. Opportunities, mentorship, power, all offered to someone who had nothing. And yet, Elijah's world was torn. Could he accept help without losing his pride? Could he trust someone who had everything he didn't? Through doubt, struggle, and fear, Elijah takes a journey no one expected. From the streets to boardrooms to the lives of hundreds he touches, every step of the way tests his courage, humanity, and heart. And at the end, the lesson is simple, yet life-changing. One act of kindness can echo louder than the roar of a billion voices. Stick with us to the end of this story, because what happens next will shock you and inspire you to ask yourself, what would you do if the world asked for just one act of humanity? It happened in a single heartbeat, metal screaming against stone, rain exploding on the windshield, and a luxury car dying in the middle of a dark, broken road. Headlights flickered like nervous eyes. The night felt heavy, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Inside the car, an old man clutched his chest, his mouth open, gasping for air. His hands shook violently on the steering wheel. The engine coughed once, then went silent. Elijah stood a few steps away, frozen under a flickering streetlight. Water ran down his face, mixing with sweat and rain. His shoes were torn, soaked through, barely holding together. His jacket was too thin for the cold, clinging to his back like wet paper. He had just finished a long walk after missing the last bus home. Every muscle in his body begged him to keep moving. Cars passed without slowing, tires splashed dirty water onto the road. A group of people stood farther down, laughing, sheltering under an awning. No one looked twice at the stalled luxury car. No one noticed the old man fading inside. Elijah took a step forward, then stopped. His heart pounded hard against his ribs. "Not my problem," a voice inside him whispered. He thought about the bills waiting at home. He thought about the landlord's warning. He thought about how often helping others had only brought him pain. Then the old man slammed his hand weakly against the window. The sound was faint, almost swallowed by the rain. Elijah flinched. He leaned closer, squinting through the fogged glass. The old man's eyes met his, wide, terrified, begging. Elijah's chest tightened. He remembered his mother gasping for breath years ago, waiting for help that came too late. His jaw clenched. "Damn it," he muttered. He rushed to the door and pulled the handle. It was locked. He knocked hard on the glass. "Sir, sir, can you hear me?" he shouted. The old man nodded weakly, fumbling with the lock. The door clicked open. Elijah grabbed the door and held it steady as the old man slumped sideways. "Easy, easy," Elijah said, slipping one arm around him. The man's body felt light, fragile, like it could break. His breathing was shallow and fast. "I can't breathe," the old man whispered. Tears leaked from the corners of his eyes. "I've got you," Elijah replied, without thinking. His voice shook, but his hands stayed firm. "You're not alone. Stay with me." Rain soaked both of them as Elijah pulled the man upright. Cold water ran down their backs. Elijah could feel the man's heart racing through his thin shirt. "Help, please," the old man begged. Elijah looked up and shouted at passing cars. "Hey, we need help!" His words vanished into the night. One car slowed for a second, then sped off. Anger flared in Elijah's chest. "What is wrong with people?" he whispered. He dug into his pocket with shaking fingers and pulled out his phone. The screen was cracked, rain smearing across it. Come on," he muttered as he dialed emergency services. "Emergency, what's your situation?" the operator asked. "My location, there's a man having chest pain. He can't breathe," Elijah said quickly. "Please hurry." "Help is on the way. Stay with him," the voice replied, reassuring. Elijah hung up and pressed his forehead against the car for a moment, overwhelmed. He took a deep breath, then he turned back to the old man. "Sir, listen to me," Elijah said slowly, calm but scared. "Breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth." He demonstrated, exaggerating the motion. The old man tried, coughing weakly. I don't deserve this," he whispered, shame in his voice. "Don't say that." Elijah shook his head firmly. He said confidently and strong, "Right now, all that matters is you staying alive." The old man stared at him, surprised. "Why are you helping me?" he asked, uncertain. "Everyone else walked away." Elijah swallowed hard, emotional weight. He glanced at the empty road, a lonely realization. "Because I know what it feels like," he said quietly. "Honest pain. To be seen and still ignored." The old man's lips trembled, emotional. "Thank you," he whispered, grateful. A single tear rolled down his cheek, vulnerable. The sound of a siren cut through the rain at last. Sudden hope. Elijah's head snapped up, alert. Red and blue lights flashed in the distance. Relief flooding. "Help's coming," Elijah said, reassuring. "You hear that? You're going to be okay." The old man squeezed Elijah's sleeve with what little strength he had, clinging to life. "Don't leave," he said, fearful. "I won't," Elijah promised, steadfast. As the ambulance pulled closer, rain still pounding, Elijah felt something shift deep inside him, a quiet transformation. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't invisible. Bittersweet realization. He was needed. And on this dark road, in the cold and the rain, one human being had chosen another. The ambulance doors slammed shut, and the sound echoed in Elijah's chest long after the vehicle sped away. Red and blue lights vanished into the rain-soaked darkness. The road felt quieter now, almost cruelly silent. Elijah stood there, drenched, breathing hard, his hands still shaking. For a moment, he just stared at the wet pavement where the old man's feet had been moments before. A cold gust of wind cut through his thin jacket. Reality rushed back in. He was late, very late. He glanced at his phone, 3 missed calls from his supervisor. His stomach tightened painfully. Missing another shift could cost him the job he barely held on to. "Why do I always do this?" he muttered to himself. Helping never paid his bills. Kindness never fixed his life. He wiped rain from his face and started walking again. With every step, his body screamed from exhaustion. His legs felt heavy, his shoes squishing with water. Streetlights flickered above him, casting broken shadows. His thoughts spiraled. He remembered the guard at his last job who laughed when Elijah asked for overtime. He remembered customers clutching their bags tighter when he walked past, humiliated. He remembered being told over and over to know his place, wounded pride. "Being good doesn't change anything," he whispered bitterly. A loud horn blared behind him. He jumped aside as a car sped past, splashing muddy water up his legs. Annoyed and tired. No apology, not even a glance. Elijah clenched his fists. For a split second, regret crept in. What if the old man didn't make it? What if stopping had been pointless? The thought twisted his chest. He reached the bus stop and collapsed onto the bench, exhausted. Rain leaked through the cracked shelter roof. Miserable. His phone buzzed again. Tension. "Where are you?" the text read, accusing tone. Elijah stared at the screen, thumbs hovering. He typed, erased, typed again, uncertain. Finally, he sent a simple reply. "Emergency. I'm on my way." Defensive honesty. He leaned back and closed his eyes, weary. Images of the old man's terrified face replayed in his mind, the way his hands shook, the way his voice cracked, lingering fear. "Please, help me." The words echoed painfully. A sudden thought hit him like a wave, realization. That man had looked powerful once, important, untouchable, and yet in that moment he had been helpless, just another human begging to live. Human vulnerability. Elijah let out a slow breath. Something inside him softened. The bus finally arrived with a screech of brakes. Interrupted silence. Elijah climbed aboard, dripping water onto the floor, self-conscious. A few passengers glanced at him, then looked away, judgmental disinterest. The driver frowned, irritated. "Rough night?" the driver muttered, flat tone. "Yeah," Elijah replied quietly, tired acceptance. He took a seat near the back, withdrawn. As the bus moved, city lights blurred past the windows, melancholy. His phone vibrated again, this time an unknown number, suspicious. He hesitated before answering. Caution. "Hello?" he said, uncertain. "Is this Elijah?" a calm voice asked, professional. "Yes," he replied, guarded. "This is Mercy General Hospital," the voice continued, formal. "You assisted a patient earlier tonight." Elijah's breath caught. Passengers around him faded into the background. Is he okay?" he asked, anxiously. "He's alive," the voice said, reassuringly, "but he's asking for you." Elijah's mouth fell open slightly. Shock. "Me?" he whispered, disbelief. "Yes, he was very clear," the nurse replied, certain. "If you can come back, he'd like to see you." Elijah stared at the floor as the bus rocked gently, conflicted. His first instinct was to say no, self-protection. Hospitals meant trouble, questions, people judging him, fearful assumptions. "I don't have much time," he said carefully, hesitant. "I understand," the nurse said kindly, empathetic, "but it seems important to him." The call ended. Elijah sat frozen as the bus continued forward, inner turmoil. His heart raced again, but this time for a different reason, uncertain emotion. Why would the man want to see him? Confusion. Had something gone wrong? Fear. Was he in trouble? Anxiety. The bus passed his stop, missed opportunity. Elijah didn't move, paralyzed. Only when the next stop came did he finally stand, decision forming. "Stop," he said to the driver, firm but polite. He stepped back into the rain, resolute. Water soaked him again instantly. Acceptance. He turned and began walking towards the hospital, heart pounding with every step, determination mixed with fear. As the hospital lights appeared in the distance, approaching destiny, Elijah felt the weight of the night settle on him. Awareness. He still didn't know who that man really was. He didn't know what waited behind those doors. Uncertainty. But he knew one thing clearly now. Clarity. Walking away earlier had been impossible, and walking away now felt even more wrong. Moral certainty. He tightened his jacket around himself and kept moving, steadfast. Whatever came next, he would face it. Quiet courage. The hospital doors slid open with a soft, mechanical hiss, and warm air rushed over Elijah's cold, soaked skin. The smell of antiseptic hit his nose instantly. Bright white lights buzzed overhead, making his tired eyes ache. He paused just inside the entrance, water dripping from his jacket onto the polished floor. People moved quickly around him, nurses, doctors, families pacing with worried faces. No one looked at him for more than a second. Elijah swallowed hard and stepped forward. At the reception desk, a woman glanced up at him, her eyes flicking over his wet clothes and worn shoes. "I was told to come here," Elijah said quietly. "Name," she tapped at the computer. "Elijah," he answered. Her expression changed slightly. "Wait here," she said. Elijah nodded and stepped aside. He stood near the wall, arms crossed tightly over his chest. His teeth chattered, partly from cold, partly from nerves. He felt out of place, like he didn't belong in such a clean, quiet space. A security guard leaned against a pillar nearby, watching him closely. Elijah noticed and immediately felt his shoulders tense. He lowered his eyes, pretending not to notice. He had learned long ago that attention often brought trouble. Minutes passed slowly. Elijah's thoughts raced. What if they thought he did something wrong? What if they blamed him for the old man's condition? What if stopping had brought him more problems than help? A nurse finally approached him, her face calm and gentle. "Elijah?" she asked quietly. "Yes," he replied. "Follow me," she said. They walked down a long hallway. The sound of their footsteps echoed softly. Elijah's heart beat louder with every step. He wiped his hands on his pants, trying to dry them. They stopped outside a private room. "He's awake," the nurse said softly. "Take your time." Elijah nodded, throat tight. He pushed the door open slowly. Inside, the room was dim, lit by a single warm lamp. Machines hummed quietly beside the bed. The old man lay there, pale but breathing steadily. Tubes and wires surrounded him. For a moment, Elijah didn't move. Seeing the man so still made his chest ache. The old man turned his head slightly and saw him. His eyes widened, then softened. "You came," he said weakly. Elijah stepped closer. "They said you wanted to see me," he replied, uncertain. "Yes," the old man said, swallowing hard. "I was afraid you wouldn't." Elijah shook his head slowly. "I almost didn't," he admitted. The old man let out a faint breath that sounded like a laugh. "I wouldn't blame you." Silence settled between them. Elijah stood awkwardly at the foot of the bed, unsure where to put his hands. The old man spoke again, his voice trembling. "I owe you my life." Elijah's eyes widened. "I just did what anyone should do," he said quickly. The old man shook his head slightly. "No," he said. "Most people didn't stop." Elijah looked away. The truth stung more than the praise. "My name is Victor," the old man continued. "Victor Hale." The name hit Elijah like a sudden gust of wind. His breath caught. He had heard that name on the news, on buildings downtown, on scholarships in companies. "The Victor Hale?" Elijah asked quietly. Victor nodded. "Yes." For a moment, Elijah felt dizzy. He laughed softly under his breath. "I didn't know," he said. "I swear I didn't." Victor studied him closely. "I know," he replied. "That's why this matters." Elijah frowned slightly, confused. "What do you mean?" Victor's eyes drifted toward the ceiling. "People treat me differently when they know who I am," he said. "They rush to help, they smile, they pretend to care." He turned his gaze back to Elijah. "You didn't know, and you still stopped." Elijah swallowed hard. "I saw someone scared," he said simply. Victor's eyes filled with tears. He blinked rapidly, trying to hold them back. "I've been powerful for so long," he whispered. "Tonight I was nothing, just an old man begging a stranger." Elijah nodded slowly. "I understand," he said. "That's how most of us live, powerless." Victor's face tightened. "And I've walked past that powerlessness more times than I can count," he admitted. The words hung heavy in the air. "I don't know why you came back," Victor said after a moment. "But I'm glad you did." Elijah met his eyes. "I didn't come for anything," he said. "I just needed to know you were alive." Victor smiled faintly. "You have a good heart," he said. Elijah shifted uncomfortably. "A good heart doesn't pay rent," he muttered bitterly. Victor let out a quiet laugh that turned into a cough. He winced, then relaxed again. "No," he said softly. "But it can change lives." Elijah didn't respond. He wasn't sure he believed that. Victor reached out slowly and rested his hand on the bedrail. "Promise me something," he said. Elijah leaned in slightly. "What?" "Don't let this world harden you," Victor said. "It almost cost me my life." Elijah felt something crack open inside him. He nodded once. As he turned to leave, Victor's voice stopped him. "Thank you," Victor said again. Elijah paused at the door. "Take care of yourself," he replied. He stepped back into the hallway, heart heavy but strangely warm. For the first time, Elijah felt seen, not as a problem, not as a shadow, but as a man who mattered. Elijah stepped out of the hospital room slowly, the door closing behind him with a soft click. The quiet hallway felt colder than before. The warmth he had felt inside the room faded quickly, replaced by uncertainty. His footsteps echoed as he walked away. He barely made it a few steps before a sharp voice cut through the silence. "Hey, you!" Elijah stopped instantly. His shoulders stiffened. He turned to see the same security guard standing near the nurse's station, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. "Yes?" Elijah replied carefully. "You're not supposed to be wandering around here," the guard said. Elijah swallowed. "The nurse brought me," he explained. "The patient asked to see me." The guard raised an eyebrow. "Uh-huh," he said slowly. Elijah felt heat rise to his face, humiliated. "I helped him earlier tonight," he said, honest. The guard looked him up and down again, judging. "Sure you did," he muttered, dismissively. That single sentence hit Elijah harder than he expected. He clenched his jaw tightly. He had heard that tone his whole life, the tone that said, "You don't belong, you're lying, you're nothing." Bitter familiarity. "I'm leaving," Elijah said quietly. He turned to go. Before he could take another step, Victor's doctor appeared at the end of the hall. "Is there a problem?" the doctor asked calmly. The guard straightened immediately, shifting attitude. "This man was wandering the floor," he said, defensive excuse. The doctor looked at Elijah, assessing. "You're Elijah?" he asked, neutrally. "Yes," Elijah answered, steadily. "He saved Mr. Hale's life," the doctor said firmly. He's welcome here." The guard's face tightened, embarrassed. He nodded stiffly and stepped back, reluctant acceptance. Elijah didn't feel victory, hollow relief. He only felt tired, deeply, bone-weary tired. "Thank you," Elijah said to the doctor, grateful but weak. The doctor nodded kindly, reassuring. "You did a good thing tonight." Elijah gave a small nod and continued down the hall, quiet exit. Each step felt heavier than the last, weighted. Outside the hospital, the rain had slowed to a light drizzle, subdued night. The city hummed softly, unaware of the moment that had just passed, indifferent world. Elijah pulled his jacket tighter around himself, self-comfort. He sat down on a bench near the entrance, fatigued. His hands trembled slightly as the adrenaline finally drained away, after effect. He stared at the wet ground, replaying the guard's words in his mind, ruminating. Who exactly are you to him? The question echoed painfully. Who was he really? A nobody with torn shoes and empty pockets, low self-worth, a man the world barely noticed unless it wanted to suspect him, bitter reality. A laugh bubbled from his chest, sharp and humorless, bitter laugh. Figures, he muttered, cynically. His phone buzzed again. Interruption. Another message from his supervisor. Dread returning. "You're off the schedule next week. We'll talk." Cold finality. Elijah stared at the screen, stunned silence. His throat tightened. Fear. There it was, the cost of stopping. Consequence. Helping someone else had once again pushed his own life further back, resigned pain. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, head in his hands, defeated posture. For a moment the weight felt unbearable, overwhelmed. Was it worth it? He whispered to himself. Doubt. Images flashed through his mind, the old man's terrified eyes, his shaking hands, his whispered, "Thank you." Elijah closed his eyes tightly, emotional flood. "Yes," he answered quietly, certain, even if it hurt, resigned truth. A soft voice interrupted his thoughts, gentle interruption. "Elijah!" He looked up to see the nurse from earlier standing nearby, surprise. "Mr. Hale asked if you'd left," she said, kind. He seemed worried. Elijah's chest tightened again, conflict. "He should rest," Elijah replied, concerned. "He doesn't need to worry about me." She smiled gently, understanding. "Still," she said, "he asked me to give you this." She handed him a folded card, curiosity. Elijah hesitated before taking it, uncertain. His fingers felt clumsy as he opened it, nervous. Inside was a simple note, written shakily. "Thank you for seeing me as human when I felt invisible." Elijah's vision blurred instantly, emotional impact. He blinked hard, but a tear escaped anyway, crying silently. He folded the note carefully and slipped it into his pocket, treasured moment. "Thank you," Elijah said to the nurse, soft gratitude. She nodded and returned inside, quiet exit. Elijah sat there longer, letting the night settle around him, contemplation. For the first time in years, something inside him resisted hardening, inner resistance. The world had tried to teach him that kindness was weakness, learned pain. Tonight, that lesson felt incomplete, questioning belief. Across the glass doors, he saw Victor's silhouette through the window, distant connection. An old man lying in a bed, alive because someone had stopped, sobering truth. Elijah stood up slowly, resolved. His problems hadn't disappeared, realistic. He was still poor, still tired, still one missed paycheck from disaster, uncertain future. But something had changed, subtle shift. For once, he hadn't walked away from himself, self-respect. He took a deep breath, straightened his shoulders, and stepped into the night. Quiet strength. Morning came slowly, gray and quiet, like the city itself was unsure how to begin again. Elijah woke on his narrow bed with a dull ache behind his eyes. The events of the night before rushed back all at once. The rain, the sirens, the hospital, Victor's face. He sat up and rubbed his face with both hands. The small room felt colder than usual. Peeling paint curled off the walls, and the hum of traffic outside reminded him how close the world was and how far away he felt from it. He reached into his jacket pocket and felt the folded note. Slowly, he opened it again and reread the words. "Thank you for seeing me as human when I felt invisible." Elijah let out a long breath. "Funny," he murmured. "That's how I feel every day." His phone buzzed on the mattress. He flinched slightly. For a second, he expected another message from his supervisor. Instead, it was an unknown number. He stared at the screen, thumb hovering. Then he answered. "Hello?" he said. "Elijah," a calm male voice said. "This is Mr. Hale's assistant." Elijah sat up straighter instantly. "Is he okay?" he asked. "He's resting comfortably," the voice replied. "Mr. Hale would like to see you again today, if you're willing." Elijah's stomach tightened. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I don't really belong in places like that." There was a pause. "Mr. Hale insists," the assistant said gently, but polite but firm. "Transportation will be arranged." Elijah almost laughed, disbelief. "I didn't help him for any favors," he said quickly, defensive honesty. "We understand," the assistant replied. "This is not a favor, it's gratitude." The call ended. Elijah sat there staring at the wall, processing. His chest felt tight, not with fear this time, but with uncertainty. He had spent his whole life avoiding attention. Attention usually brought questions, suspicion, or disappointment. Still, something inside him pulled forward. A black car arrived outside an hour later. Elijah stood by the curb, hands shoved deep into his pockets. The driver stepped out and nodded respectfully. "Mr. Elijah?" the driver asked. "That's me," Elijah replied. The ride was quiet. Buildings grew taller, streets cleaner. Elijah watched his reflection in the tinted window, tired eyes, worn face. He wondered how many times Victor had traveled these roads without ever seeing people like him. At the hospital, staff greeted Elijah differently this time. Smiles appeared, doors opened quickly. Elijah noticed every detail. Respect felt unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable. Victor was sitting up in bed when Elijah entered. Color had returned slightly to his face. His eyes brightened immediately when he saw Elijah. "You came," Victor said. Elijah nodded. "You asked." Victor gestured to the chair beside the bed. "Sit, please." Elijah sat slowly. The room felt quieter than before. "I couldn't stop thinking about you," Victor said. "About the way you looked at me. No fear, no greed, just concern." Elijah shifted. "I was scared," he admitted, honestly. "I just didn't show it." Victor smiled faintly. "That's courage," Victor said. "Not the absence of fear, but acting anyway." Elijah looked down at his hands. "Courage doesn't pay rent," he repeated quietly. Victor's smile faded. "Tell me about your life," Victor said. Elijah hesitated. No one with power had ever asked him that before. Still, he spoke. He talked about missed buses and late shifts, about jobs that never lasted, about being judged before he ever spoke. His voice cracked once, then steadied. Victor listened without interrupting. His eyes reflected something close to shame. "I built my empire believing effort always led to success," Victor said slowly. "Listening to you, I realized how incomplete that belief was." Elijah shrugged. "Effort just keeps some of us standing." Victor took a breath. "I want to help," he said. Elijah stiffened. "I don't want pity," he said firmly. "And I don't want to give it," Victor replied. "I want to invest in the kind of person who stops when the world keeps walking." The words landed heavily. Elijah swallowed. "Education support, training, a stable role, if you want it, on your terms." Elijah felt his heart race. "Why?" he asked. Victor met his eyes. "Because yesterday showed me the cost of ignoring people, and I refuse to do that again." Silence stretched between them. Elijah closed his eyes briefly. He thought of the note in his pocket. He thought of the road, the rain, the choice. "I'll think about it," Elijah said finally. Victor nodded. "That's all I ask." As Elijah stood to leave, Victor spoke again. "Whatever you decide," he said, "know this: you already changed my life." Elijah paused. He nodded once and walked out. In the hallway, his steps felt different. The world hadn't transformed yet, but for the first time a door had opened, not because he forced it, but because he had chosen compassion. And that choice was still echoing. Elijah walked out of the hospital that second time with slower steps, as if the ground beneath him had subtly changed. The air outside felt different, brighter, sharper, almost too real. Cars moved past, people hurried along sidewalks, life continuing as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Yet inside Elijah, everything felt unsettled. The ride back to his neighborhood was quiet. He sat by the window, watching expensive buildings fade into cracked sidewalks and flickering streetlights. His reflection stared back at him in the glass, same worn jacket, same tired eyes. But his thoughts raced. Opportunity, education, stability. The words echoed in his head, heavy and unreal. He had heard promises before, empty ones, broken ones. People like him were offered hope only to have it pulled away. When he reached his building, the front light was out again. He climbed the narrow stairs slowly, each step creaking under his weight. Inside his room, he sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall. "What if this is real?" he whispered to the empty space. "And what if it isn't?" another voice answered inside him. He pulled Victor's note from his pocket again. The paper was creased now, soft from being unfolded so many times. He read it once more, slower than before. "Thank you for seeing me as human when I felt invisible." Elijah pressed his lips tightly. "I see people every day," he murmured. "Nobody ever sees me." That night sleep came in fragments. Dreams of rain and sirens twisted with images of clean hallways and open doors. He woke before sunrise, heart pounding. Days passed. Elijah returned to job searches, standing in lines, filling out forms that led nowhere. Frustration. He avoided thinking about Victor's offer, telling himself it was safer that way, but the thought followed him everywhere. Then, one afternoon, his phone rang again. Unknown number. He stared at it for a long moment before answering. "Hello?" he said, cautiously. "Elijah," Victor's voice came through, weaker but warm. "I hope I'm not bothering you." Elijah straightened instinctively. "No, sir," he replied, respectfully. "I'm glad you called." "I've been thinking," Victor said, reflectively, "about what you said, about dignity." Elijah leaned against the wall. "I didn't mean to lecture you," he said, uneasily. Victor let out a soft chuckle. "You didn't," he replied, assuringly. "You reminded me." There was a pause. "I don't want you to feel cornered," Victor continued, carefully. "So let me be clear. You owe me nothing." Elijah closed his eyes briefly, relief mixed with suspicion. "Then why keep calling?" he asked, honestly. "Because," Victor said slowly, "sincerely, I'm used to people telling me yes out of fear or need. You didn't. That matters to me." Elijah swallowed. No one had ever said that to him before. "I want you to meet someone," Victor added, purposefully. "Not for a job, just a conversation." Elijah hesitated. "Okay," he said, finally, cautiously. They met 2 days later in a small office near the hospital. No luxury, no crowd, just a quiet room and a woman named Margaret. "She runs the foundation," Victor explained, proudly. "The one I never paid enough attention to." Margaret gently smiled. "Victor told me how you met," she said, curious kindness. "I've worked in social programs for 20 years. People like you rarely walk through this door." Elijah stiffened. "People like me?" he asked, guardedly. She nodded calmly. "People who help without expecting rescue." The words caught Elijah off guard. They talked for over an hour about Elijah's life, his skills, his struggles. He spoke carefully at first, then more freely. No one interrupted, no one doubted him. Victor listened quietly from his chair. At one point, his eyes glistened. "You see," Victor said softly to Margaret, "this is what I've been missing." Elijah shifted uncomfortably. "I'm not special," he said, downplaying. "I just stopped." Margaret leaned forward slightly. "That's exactly why you are," she replied confidently. Victor took a breath. "Elijah," Victor said seriously, "I don't want to offer you a job. I want to offer you a path." "A path to what?" Elijah asked, searchingly. "To learning," Victor said, clearly. "To leadership, if you choose it. To a role in helping others, not from the bottom looking up, but from the inside shaping change." Elijah's chest tightened, overwhelmed. "I don't even know where to start," he admitted, vulnerably. "That's okay," Margaret said, reassuringly. "No one ever does." Silence filled the room again. Elijah looked at his hands. He saw the road, the rain, the fear. He saw Victor's eyes in the car that night. "What if I fail?" Elijah asked quietly. Victor answered without hesitation. "Then you fail, having been seen." The words landed deep. Elijah felt something loosen in his chest. "I don't want to be a symbol," Elijah said, firmly. "I don't want to be a story people use and forget." Victor nodded, respectful agreement. "Neither do I," he said, sincerely. "That's why this has to be built with you, not around you." Elijah took a long breath. "Then I'll try," he said, quiet courage. Victor smiled, slow and genuine. Margaret nodded approvingly. As Elijah left the office, the city looked the same. Sirens still wailed somewhere. People still rushed by. But Elijah walked differently now. For the first time, he wasn't just surviving the world. The days that followed felt heavier, not lighter. Elijah had expected relief after saying yes, some sudden rush of hope or certainty. Instead, doubt sat with him like a shadow that refused to leave. Every morning he woke with the same question echoing in his chest. What if I don't belong here either? He walked through his neighborhood with slower steps than usual. The cracked sidewalks, the familiar faces, the corner store that let him buy on credit. This was the world that had shaped him. Children ran past him laughing, and an old woman nodded at him from her stoop. This place knew him. The other world, the one Victor came from, still felt distant, unreal. At the foundation office, Elijah sat quietly in the back of the room during meetings. People spoke in calm voices about budgets, outreach, and long-term impact. Words like strategy and metrics floated through the air. Elijah listened carefully, afraid to interrupt. One afternoon, a man across the table cleared his throat. "So," he said, looking directly at Elijah, "you're the one who stopped on the road." The room went quiet. Elijah felt every eye turn toward him. His chest tightened. "Yes," Elijah answered. The man leaned back slightly. "And now you're what, a consultant?" he asked. Elijah opened his mouth, then closed it again. Before he could respond, Victor spoke. "He's here because he sees what we don't," Victor said. "That's not something you can learn from a report." The man nodded stiffly, but the doubt remained in his eyes. Elijah swallowed hard. The old familiar feeling crept in, the sense of being tolerated, not welcomed. Later that day, Elijah stood alone by the window. The city stretched below, busy and uncaring. Victor joined him quietly. "You felt that, didn't you?" Victor asked. Elijah didn't look at him. "I'm used to it," Elijah replied. "People questioning why I'm in the room." Victor nodded slowly. "I spent my life being questioned for what I wanted," he said, "not for who I was." Elijah finally turned to him. "That's the difference," he said. "Some of us are always on trial." Victor absorbed the words in silence. That evening, Elijah returned home exhausted. He sat on his bed and stared at the wall. The doubts returned stronger now. "Maybe I was wrong to say yes," he thought. "Maybe stopping that night was the only good thing I had to give," another voice whispered. His phone buzzed. A message from Margaret appeared on the screen. "Community visit tomorrow. I'd like you to come." Elijah hesitated before replying. Then he typed back, "Okay." The next morning, they drove to a neighborhood much like Elijah's own. Narrow streets, faded buildings, people watching from porches with cautious eyes. A small crowd gathered as they stepped out of the car. "What do you want?" a man asked bluntly. Margaret began to explain, but Elijah stepped forward instinctively. "We're not here to fix you," Elijah said. "We're here to listen." The man studied Elijah's face closely. Something shifted. "You from around here?" he asked. "Somewhere like this," Elijah replied. The tension eased slightly. They spent hours talking with residents. Elijah listened more than he spoke. When he did speak, people leaned in. He didn't use polished words or promises. He spoke from memory, from nights of hunger, from being ignored. Victor watched quietly from the side. He saw something happen that no boardroom had ever shown him. Doors opened, voices rose, trust formed. On the drive back, Victor exhaled slowly. "I've spent millions trying to earn what you created today." Elijah looked out the window. "I didn't trust me," he said. "They recognized me." Victor nodded. That night, Elijah sat alone again, but the doubt felt different now, quieter, less sharp. He thought about the people from the neighborhood. For the first time, Elijah realized something important. Belonging wasn't granted by rooms or titles, it was built through presence. The next meeting, Elijah spoke up. "We're measuring the wrong things," he said. "Trust doesn't show up in numbers right away." Silence followed. Then Margaret nodded slowly. Victor smiled faintly. The skeptical man leaned forward. "Then how do we measure it?" he asked. Elijah met his eyes. "We show up," he said, again and again. As the meeting ended, Elijah felt the weight lift just a little more. The path ahead was still uncertain. He would still be questioned, still doubted. But now, when that doubt came, it no longer told him to leave. It told him to stay. Change did not arrive all at once. It crept in slowly, quietly, like light finding its way through a cracked door. Elijah felt it in small moments, in how people paused when he spoke, in how questions replaced suspicion. Still, with every step forward, fear followed closely behind. The foundation announced a new initiative weeks later. It was meant to connect donors directly with the communities they claimed to care about. Elijah listened from his seat as plans were discussed. Spreadsheets appeared. Projections were made. The room felt distant again. Then Victor turned toward Elijah. "I want you to lead this," he said. The room went still. Elijah felt every muscle in his body tense. "Me?" he asked quietly. Yes, Victor replied without hesitation. You understand both sides of this better than anyone here. A murmur spread around the table. Elijah felt heat rise to his face. The old voice inside him returned. They're watching you fail. I'm not ready, Elijah said honestly. Victor leaned forward. Neither was I when I first stepped into responsibility, he said. Readiness comes from trying. Elijah swallowed hard. All eyes stayed on him. He nodded slowly. Okay, he said, quiet commitment. I'll try. The first weeks were brutal. Elijah worked longer hours than ever before. He made mistakes, missed calls, unclear plans. Each error felt magnified. One afternoon, a donor snapped during a meeting. This isn't efficient, the man said sharply. This isn't here to feel good, we're here for results. Elijah's chest tightened. The room blurred for a second. These are people, Elijah replied, voice firm despite the tremor, not numbers. The donor scoffed. That's idealism. Elijah stood his ground. No, he said. That's reality. The silence afterward felt heavy. Victor said nothing, but his eyes held quiet approval. That night, Elijah sat alone at his desk. His papers were spread everywhere. He buried his face in his hands. I can't do this, he whispered. I don't belong here. His phone buzzed softly. A message from Victor appeared. Come by if you can. They met in Victor's office, smaller and more personal than Elijah expected. Books lined the shelves. Victor poured tea carefully. You look like I felt after my first major failure, Victor said gently. Elijah laughed weakly. So this feeling doesn't go away? He asked. Victor shook his head. No, but you learn it doesn't define you. Elijah stared into the cup. What if I disappoint everyone? He asked fearfully. Victor's voice softened. Then you'll still be the man who stopped on the road, he said. That matters more than success. The words settled deep inside Elijah. Weeks later, Elijah led his first community forum alone. The room was filled with residents, activists, and a few skeptical donors. His hands shook as he stepped to the front. He took a breath. I'm not here to tell you what you need, he began. I'm here because I've needed help and didn't get it. The room quieted. I know what it feels like to be ignored, he continued. So tonight we listen. Something shifted. People spoke, angry, hopeful, afraid. Elijah listened, wrote notes, asked questions. He didn't rush anyone. By the end of the night, the room felt lighter, not fixed, but heard. A woman approached Elijah afterward. Tears shone in her eyes. Thank you, she said. No one's asked us like this before. Elijah nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Thank you for trusting me, he replied. When Victor heard how the forum went, he smiled quietly. You're building something real, he said. Elijah didn't feel triumphant. He felt responsible. The work was far from over. That responsibility followed him home. One night, while walking past the same road where everything had begun, Elijah stopped. Rain drizzled lightly. He imagined walking past that car instead. His life would be simpler, smaller, maybe safer. A sobering thought, but emptier. A homeless man nearby asked quietly, "Spare some change?" Elijah knelt beside him instead. "What's your name?" he asked. The man looked surprised. "Marcus," he said. Elijah listened to his story. No promises, no speeches, just time. As Elijah stood to leave, Marcus said, "Most people don't stop." Elijah felt a familiar ache in his chest. "Someone stopped for me once," he replied. He walked away knowing something important. Leadership wasn't about titles or rooms. It was about stopping, again and again, when the world kept moving. And this time, Elijah knew he would not turn back. Months passed, and with each one, Elijah's life transformed in ways he never thought possible. He no longer felt like the invisible man he once was. The Foundation's projects had grown under his guidance, but more importantly, the lives he touched now mattered, not as numbers, but as real people. Every day brought challenges, but Elijah had begun to trust himself in ways he never had before. Early one morning, he arrived at the office to find Victor waiting for him by the window. Sunlight poured through the glass, highlighting the subtle lines on Victor's face. His eyes, once sharp and calculating, now held a warmth Elijah had only glimpsed months ago. "Elijah," Victor began, his voice calm but deliberate. "I've been watching you. You've done more than I imagined you could, more than I imagined I could do." Elijah hesitated, brushing a hand over his face. "I didn't do it alone," he said quietly. "The team, the people, they helped too." Victor shook his head slowly. "Yes, but the spark, the courage to truly see them, to listen, to stop when the world rushes by, that came from you." Elijah felt a surge of pride, quickly tempered by self-doubt. "I'm still just a guy from the streets, Victor," he murmured. "Belonging isn't about streets or offices, it's about purpose, and you've found yours." For a moment, Elijah stared out the window, watching the city wake up. Cars honked, buses rattled past, and life went on for everyone else. But for him, the world felt sharper, richer, more alive. Every choice mattered now, every action had weight. The office phone rang suddenly, breaking the moment. Elijah picked it up. "Mr. Elijah," a familiar voice said. It was Margaret. "We've received a request from a community in the East Side. They've heard about your work. They want to start a program, but they need someone to guide them." Elijah's heart beat faster. "I'll go," he said without hesitation. Victor smiled knowingly. "That's the spirit. Go, build, and bring them hope the way you've built it here." The drive to the East Side was quiet. Elijah watched neighborhoods flash past, noticing things he never had before. Broken windows, kids running barefoot, storefronts shuttered with graffiti, all the signs of struggle and neglect. But he also noticed people helping each other, sharing smiles and moments of kindness. It reminded him of himself not long ago. When he arrived at the community center, a group of residents had gathered, some skeptical, others hopeful. Elijah stepped forward, shoulders square, heart pounding, nervous determination. "I'm Elijah," he said, voice strong but calm. "I'm not here to fix your problems. I'm here to work with you, to listen, to make sure your voices are heard." The room remained quiet for a moment. Then a woman in the back raised her hand. "What makes you different from the others?" she asked. Elijah took a deep breath. "I've walked in streets like yours. I've felt invisible, ignored, powerless, and someone once stopped for me. They gave me a chance. I'm here to give the same chance back to you." A murmur ran through the room. Faces softened, eyes met his with curiosity and cautious hope. Over the next few hours, Elijah facilitated conversations, listened to concerns, and helped organize plans. He didn't speak over anyone, he guided gently, always returning to the principle that the people themselves held the answers. By evening, the community center felt alive in a way Elijah had never seen before. Residents exchanged ideas, made commitments, and even laughed together. Elijah stepped outside for a moment, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. He felt the exhaustion in his body, but it was paired with satisfaction, a sense of purpose he had never experienced. Later that night, back at his small apartment, Elijah opened the note Victor had given him months ago. He read it again slowly, savoring the words. "Thank you for seeing me as human when I felt invisible." He smiled softly. That single act of kindness had set everything in motion. Elijah's phone buzzed with another message, this time from Victor. "Proud of you, Elijah. Keep stopping. Keep seeing. The world needs it." Elijah put the phone down and leaned back on his bed. He let out a long breath, feeling the weight of responsibility settle in a comfortable way this time. He thought about the people he had met that day, the skeptical faces that now held a spark of hope. He thought about Marcus, the homeless man he had spoken to on the rainy street, and the woman in the back of the room who had challenged him. Each person mattered, and each moment had built him into the person he was becoming. For the first time in his life, Elijah felt that his life had meaning beyond survival. The street, the struggle, the uncertainty, all of it had prepared him for this moment. He understood now that life wasn't about avoiding failure, it was about showing up, listening, and stopping when it mattered most. The city outside was quiet, but Elijah felt a pulse within himself that matched the rhythm of life he had begun to understand. He knew challenges would come, people would doubt him, and mistakes would happen, but for the first time he didn't fear them the way he once had. He closed his eyes and whispered softly to himself, "I'll keep stopping, I'll keep seeing." And in that quiet room, with the night stretching outside and the weight of possibility resting on his shoulders, Elijah realized something profound. True power wasn't measured in wealth or status, it was measured in courage, empathy, and the willingness to act when it mattered most. For the first time, he didn't feel invisible. He felt unstoppable. He felt human. And he knew without a shadow of a doubt that his journey had only just begun. The final months of that year transformed Elijah in ways he never could have imagined. He no longer woke to uncertainty or self-doubt the way he had before. Each morning carried a sense of purpose, a clarity that had once seemed impossible. He still lived simply, still wore worn shoes and carried his modest backpack, but his heart carried weight far greater than material wealth could measure. One morning, Elijah arrived at the foundation earlier than usual. The city was just stirring. Sunlight filtered through the tall buildings, casting golden streaks across the streets. As he walked toward the office, he passed people he had helped, families he had met through community programs, residents from neighborhoods once ignored, and children who now smiled with hope. Some waved at him, their expressions lit with recognition and gratitude. He smiled back quietly, but inside he felt a surge of emotion. It was a feeling he hadn't experienced in years, the quiet satisfaction of knowing his actions mattered, of knowing that someone, many someones, had been lifted because he had chosen to stop. Victor was already at the office, standing by the window and looking out at the streets below. When he saw Elijah, his face broke into a small but genuine smile. "Good morning," he said warmly. "Good morning, sir," Elijah replied, his voice steady. Victor turned toward him, eyes serious. "I've been thinking about all the work you've done, your leadership, your dedication, your courage," he said slowly. "I changed the way we approach everything here, not just the programs, but how we see people, how we listen, how we act." Elijah felt his chest tighten. He had spent his life feeling invisible, doubted and dismissed, and now, hearing these words from someone like Victor, a man who once seemed untouchable, made him realize just how far he had come. "Thank you," Elijah said softly. "I couldn't have done it alone. The communities, the team, they all taught me as much as I hope I taught them." Victor nodded slowly. "That's true, but you were the spark. You stopped when the world kept walking. That's what made the difference." The office door opened, and Margaret walked in with a stack of papers. "Morning, I've brought the plans for the new outreach program. They'll require your guidance and leadership," she said, direct. Elijah took the papers, feeling their weight in his hands. He glanced at the lists, charts, and schedules, knowing that each line represented real people, lives that could change. "I'll make sure we do this right," Elijah said firmly. "No shortcuts. We'll listen, we'll learn, and we'll act carefully." Margaret nodded, satisfied. "I have no doubt you will." As the day began, Elijah led meetings, guided volunteers, and spoke with residents from different neighborhoods. Each interaction reminded him of the night he first met Victor, the rain, the abandoned road, the moment of choice. That single decision to stop had set in motion everything he was experiencing now. During a break, Elijah stepped outside onto the building's terrace, letting the city air fill his lungs. Below, people walked to work, children played in the streets, and life went on as usual. But for Elijah, nothing was usual anymore. He had seen the power of stopping, the weight of compassion, and the strength that came from choosing humanity over indifference. Victor joined him, hands in pockets, looking out at the same streets. "Do you remember the first time we met?" he asked reflectively. Elijah smiled faintly. "I remember the rain, the car, your fear," he replied softly, "and I remember stopping." Victor chuckled, a sound both warm and distant. "Yes, and I remember thinking that maybe you were crazy to trust me." Elijah laughed softly. "Maybe, but it worked out." Victor turned to him, serious again. "Elijah, you've taught me more than you know. Not just about people, but about myself, about how easy it is to forget the humanity in others, how simple gestures can change everything." Elijah looked out at the city again. "I never imagined it would go this far," he said quietly. "I just stopped." Victor smiled, eyes glistening slightly. "Stopping was the start. Everything else came from what you did next." Later that afternoon, Elijah visited one of the neighborhoods he had helped transform. Children ran to him, laughing and shouting his name. Mothers waved from doorsteps, offering smiles of recognition. Even local shop owners nodded respectfully as he passed. Elijah knelt to speak with a young boy who had been struggling in school. "You're doing well," he said, encouragingly. "Keep working hard. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The boy's eyes lit up. "Hopeful," he said, confidently. Elijah straightened, heart swelling. He realized that his life had become a chain reaction of small acts, stopping, listening, and helping, that now rippled outwards in ways he couldn't have predicted. That evening, back at his apartment, Elijah sat quietly. The room was modest, unchanged, but he felt the difference in himself. He opened the note Victor had given him months ago one last time. "Thank you for seeing me as human when I felt invisible." Elijah smiled softly. That one act had become the cornerstone of a life rebuilt. He reached for his phone and typed a message to Victor. "I understand now. It's not the wealth, not the titles, it's the courage to stop. Thank you for showing me that the world can change one person at a time." Victor's reply came quickly. "And thank you for showing me that humanity can never be ignored. Keep stopping, Elijah. The world is listening." Elijah put down his phone and leaned back, closing his eyes. He thought about the people he had helped, the lives that were changing, and the endless possibilities ahead. For the first time, he truly believed in the power of one person's choice, in the ripple effect of a single act of compassion. He rose slowly and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights flickering as dusk settled. Somewhere in the distance, rain began to fall again, soft and steady. Elijah smiled, knowing that just as he had once stopped in the rain, he would continue to stop, again and again, whenever the world needed him. In that quiet moment, Elijah understood the final truth of his journey. Courage wasn't about grand gestures or wealth, it was about choosing humanity every single day in every small decision. And by choosing that path, he had transformed not only his own life, but the lives of countless others. He whispered to himself, barely audible over the rain, "I'll keep stopping, I'll keep seeing, I'll keep believing." And for the first time in his life, Elijah knew that he was truly unstoppable. The night settled over the city, quiet yet alive. Elijah turned from the window, ready to continue the work that had become his life. The world outside might rush by, blind to the small acts of courage within it, but Elijah had learned to see, and seeing, he realized, was everything.